Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. Units of History, 10,000 Immortals documentary, rum and coke. It's not good. It's close to just rubbing alcohol and ice. Okay, let's just get in with the video. This was not a request, and this is Invicta if I haven't said it, which I'm pretty sure I already did because I'm drinking.
The Immortals, Persia's finest 10,000 warriors who conquered the world for the King of Kings and who famously faced the Spartans at Thermopylae. Today we will be taking a closer look at this iconic unit of antiquity.
And these are the guys that faced the 300.
This video was sponsored by Magellan TV. They're an awesome documentary streaming service run by filmmakers with a selection of over 2,000 videos to choose from among the categories of history, science,
I'm not saying you're wrong, man.
Invicta.
Go get Magellan. Tell them I sent you.
Came from
If you tell them I sent you, you get 700% off. It's not true at all.
the ranks of the Archimenid Persian Empire, an ancient Iranian realm founded by Cyrus the Great, which stretched from the borders of Greece in the west to the edges of India in the east. Its armies were composed of huge numbers of troops from a wide range of communities, which were on full display when Xerxes led his army to conquer Greece in the 5th century BC.
Xerxes. That was the guy in 300, correct? And that name sounds familiar. I'm going to say I'm correct.
It is this dazzling martial diversity that Herodotus captures in his histories and from which we derive our primary written account of the Immortals. Unfortunately, his account is the only written source explicitly mentioning the Immortals by name which survives today, and we are therefore left with many unanswered questions about the origins of the unit. When were they formed? Where were they garrisoned? How long were they in service? What was their recruitment and training like? All of these mysteries have led to much speculation in the historical community, but ultimately little is known for sure. It is with this disclaimer in mind that we will proceed. One leading theory is that the Immortals were originally a bodyguard unit at the immediate disposal of the kings of Persia. Cyrus, in his forming of the empire, did much fighting and would have had to rely on a core group of soldiers around which to form his armies. These units would have been organized according to the traditional Persian decimal system, with groupings of tens, hundreds, and thousands of men. It is posited that in the roughly 75 years between Cyrus and Xerxes, one of these elite units was successfully enlarged up to a size of 10,000.
Side note, I just did a video on Cyrus yesterday, which I don't know when that'll be released. So that's crazy. I mean, you know, it's crazy interesting for me.
And came to represent a core part of the standing imperial Persian army. The prestigious nature of the force and its key role in the marshalling of forces would have meant that it received much attention in the form of funding and recruitment. This idea is supported by the passage in Herodotus which states that when any one of them was forced to fall out of the number by death or sickness, another was chosen so that they were never more or fewer than 10,000. With regards to recruitment, we can draw some insight by looking at how Iranian nobles were trained up for battle. As youths, they were schooled in companies of 50 to run, swim, ride horses, shoot arrows, stand watch, and go on long marches. At 20, they entered the professional military with careers that lasted into their 50s. To quote the experience of Darius, "Trained I am both with hands and with feet. As a bowman I am good, both afoot and on horseback. As a spearman, I also excel as a footman and a rider."
They're like Navy SEALs.
But again, there is much academic debate over the subject, and we should not be too closely married to any of these potential narratives. Luckily for us, the description by Herodotus does a better job of providing an overview of their armament. I will now quote him directly. Behind Xerxes came 10,000 that were foot soldiers, chosen out of the rest of the Persians. 1,000 of these had golden pomegranates on their spear shafts instead of a spike, and surrounded the rest. The 9,000 who were inside them had silver pomegranates. A later passage mentions some of the men bearing tall shields, scaled armor, torques, and bracelets. Once again, we don't have a complete picture, but by making some assumptions, and in particular associating the Immortals with murals found at Susa, we start to get a better idea. Basically what we have...
So I'm guessing the 1,000...
I finally found something that got my blood pressure back to normal levels. I found this about a month and a half ago.
I don't care. I'm going to guess then... Hold on. That the 1,000 with gold were probably higher ranking than the 9,000 with silver. So they were, probably outside. They were be the first ones to attack, so to speak.
Basically what we have here are some Persian heavy infantry. For defense, they bore body armor made of iron scales, with which was worn a pleated skirt or tight-fitting tunic. Heads were protected by fluted hats, with some upgrading these to metal helmets, while feet were protected by strapped shoes or boots. However, the primary defensive equipment was a large wicker shield with fiber threads passed through leather that could stop arrows. The shape might be tall and rectangular, which could be planted in the ground for cover.
Oh, yeah.
Or
you just plant it in the ground and you can kneel down underneath it and kind of protect yourself. You're almost like, if you're 6 foot, maybe it was a 5 foot shield. Plant it down, you duck a little bit, and you protect yourself. That's smart.
Could be the more mobile figure-8 Boeotian style. For offense, they had...
I would say the men in the front had the other shields. These guys had those. I apologize, I like to point, and I think that you can see me point. Like, hey, that weapon right there, that's a pretty good one. What weapon did I point to?
Several weapons at their disposal. While at range, they would have used composite bows supplied by a quiver full of reed arrows. In close combat, they would have primarily used a short spear. According to Herodotus, it is this weapon which was most symbolic for the Immortals and featured the gold and silver pomegranate designs. However, one might also see some of these troops with the battle axe favored by many Iranians. Finally, there would have been a small short sword as a backup secondary option. So how would the Immortals have behaved on the battlefield? Well, according to the Persian military doctrine, most battles would begin with a heavy missile barrage to break up the enemy ranks. Since the Immortals were proficient with the bow, they could have contributed to the outgoing torrent of arrows. The next stage of combat would see the infantry advance forwards with cavalry protection on the flanks. It was common for Persian military commanders to closely participate in the fighting themselves, and thus, for their own protection, they would have been accompanied by the elite heavy troops of the army. The Immortals, therefore, were likely deployed where the action was expected to be the fiercest, in order to shore up the strength of their own lines and more readily break those of the enemies. This sort of behavior is evidenced by the following passage from Herodotus. Where Mardonius was himself riding a white horse in the battle and surrounded by 1,000 picked men who were the flower of the Persians, there they pressed their adversaries hardest. So long as Mardonius was alive, the Persians stood their ground and defended themselves, overthrowing many Spartans. But beyond this, we have very little else to go on regarding their battle tactics. Let's now turn to the service history of the Immortals. If we assume that the Immortals were at the core of the Persian field armies since the reign of Cyrus, then they would have seen quite a lot of combat. Initially, this would have involved fighting against similarly armed and equipped Eastern troops during the overthrow of the Median Empire. But soon after, the frontier regions would have been quelled and expeditions were launched against the nomadic riders of the steppe, including the Bactrian, Saka, and Massageti tribes. Later expeditions saw them expand the borders of the Archimenid Empire, with fighting in India and Egypt. Finally, the Immortals would take part in the campaigns against the Greek city-states during the 5th century BC. The Immortals were definitely at Thermopylae, as is recorded by Herodotus, and may have also been present at the later Battle of Plataea. In either case, they would have followed the retreat of the Persians back to their territories and resumed their role as a core battlefield unit. In this capacity, they may have been present at the Battle of Cunaxa during the revolt of Cyrus the Younger, and also likely were participants in the later Battle of Gaugamela during the invasion of Alexander the Great. After this, the Archimenid Empire was shattered, and its remains eventually carved up between the various successor kingdoms. The Immortals were thus likely disbanded, and their elite forces potentially absorbed into the new armies of their conquerors. Evidence suggests that the later Sassanid Empire would resurrect the Immortals as a unit, but that this reincarnation took the form of a heavy cavalry bodyguard. Their memory would echo through the ages to such a degree that in 1942, the Iranian army created its own Immortal Guard, composed of about 5,000 men and a battalion of tanks.
Interesting.
I hope you've enjoyed this closer look at one of the most famous yet mysterious units of antiquity.
Wow, that was a quick 11 minutes. 10 minutes, 25 seconds. So, the Immortals then were Iranian. Interesting. A lot of times when they lay out the map, when they show the different things, I'm not exactly knowledgeable on, the foreign map as to what country was what. So, very cool. I'll say this about the Immortals. At least they appeared to be loyal. Because I just did the video on the Macedonian Silver Shields. And I mean, they killed their own leader. They killed 2 of them. Just untrustworthy. And then they lost other gold. That's a different video. But at least these guys were loyal. Well, I'm going to end this here. This is interesting. Yeah, Immortals, I know the Immortals from fighting 300 under, was it Perseus? Wow, I already forgot the name. Who cares? Video's over. I'm drinking. Have a good day, have a good night.